What's up, guys? Welcome back to Tidal Gardens. I wanted to take a moment and talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and that is, what is the deal with purchasing corals online? Why is it so challenging? And I can give you some background and some tips to make the process a little bit easier. So for a little bit of background on Tidal Gardens, we sell the vast majority of our corals online. So every day, I'm very thankful that people have taken the step to purchase our products online because it is so challenging. So trust me, guys, I'm not taking it for granted at all. There are so many significant hurdles to purchasing online, and I have to say, I'm always grateful that we have this process in place. So let's go over 5 issues that people might run into. The very first one is the fact that corals, just by their very nature, are a moving target. They can vary wildly in coloration just by the tank conditions, by water quality, things like lighting and flow. All these things affect a coral's coloration, or even what kind of food that they're being fed. All that plays into what type of colors and growth patterns that coral is going to express. Now, some are very consistent, like let's say a sarcophyton leather, big toadstool. It's not going to change a ton depending on any factors really. But if you look at an acropora, you can get total color palette changes. So when you run into an issue where corals can change color like that, just the way that coral has colored up, depending on how the seller has kept that particular animal, once it's in your tank, you can almost guarantee there's going to be some sort of color palette shift because your tank isn't that other person's tank. Even if you wanted to outline exactly what that person did, there's a lot of factors in it that make one tank different than another. And so you can kind of expect some variation going on. So let me relay a story to you about color change. Long ago, I had purchased some Reggae Florida from another hobbyist. And in his tank, they looked amazing. They were large, they were purple and like a deep, deep violet. And I was like, that's definitely an amazing Reggae. I've never seen one like that before. I have to have it. Swept it up. I put it into my tank. And the difference in these two tanks is that he grew his corals under T5s. Actually, they weren't even T5s back then. I think they were just VHOs. This was a long time ago. And in my tank, I'm using mostly metal halide at the time. I was using some 400 watt like Iwasaki's or something like that. But in my tank, all of my Recordias were like blue, right? And so this new addition, I put it in the tank, sure enough, amazing, like velvety purple. Very different from anything I had. And I was like, sweet, this is going to be an amazing one to grow out. Long story short, you give that coral about 3 weeks to a month, and it was completely indistinguishable from all of my other blue ones. It was just like the lighting and whatever other parameters that he kept his tank under. Yeah, same mushroom, completely different lighting and whatnot, completely different perhaps water change regimen, but got very different results. So again, it's not even an online purchasing thing, it's just that it's that moving target thing. There's a lot of a coral's appearance that can be influenced by a home hobbyist. The next item that I'd like to talk about, number 2, is that just simply the angle of view can change the appearance of a coral. So, although not coral, clams are famous for this. If you look at a Maxima clam at basically like 90 degrees through the glass, you might see a lot more blues, for example. If you look at it top down, you might see more greens. And every angle in between, you're going to get a color change. A lot of corals are that way. So you might just do a search for top-down reef aquarium shots or something like that. And sure enough, you're going to see dramatically different appearances. Same light, same coral, same everything, but it's just that angle change. So I have a little bit of a story that I can share with you. We do business with a local importer here. And we purchase a lot of corals from them, and in turn they actually purchase a lot of stuff that we are growing like crazy in our greenhouse and we're trying to just to make space with. So anyway, we sell a lot of stuff to this importer. And one time I was going shopping there, I was looking at some Montipora, and I noticed this like amazing red and blue Monty. And I was like, we have to have this one. This one's gonna be a winner. When I brought it home, sure enough, it's kind of one that we had sold to them literally days before. So even like ignoring the online shopping element from this is a coral that I saw in person that I was incredibly familiar with because I've been looking at it in my own tank for years. And yet, because I'm looking at it in somebody else's tank from a different angle, under slightly different lighting conditions, I thought it was a completely different coral. So, long story short, I purchased my own corals back. Number 3, what makes purchasing corals very challenging online? It's really no fault of the seller, it's no fault of the buyer, it's the fault of the camera. These guys. Cameras, generally speaking, are complete garbage at shooting reef aquariums. Reef aquariums they're a very challenging subject to shoot, just from a technical standpoint. They are dim. I mean, we think that they're bright because we're spending a lot of time researching lighting, spending a lot on electricity, trying to measure PAR and whatnot. They're very dim. Like you point a camera at a fish tank, it's looking like it's pretty dark, regardless of what is over that thing. Also, the spectrum of the lighting that we're using, it's on this kind of like this fringe territory of very blue, like a lot of 430 nanometer type stuff. And a camera is not made for a reef hobbyist. A camera is made for Instagram, where you're shooting something probably in daylight, something brighter and in daylight. So a lot of the absorption that's going on in a sensor, it's tailored to like the medium part of the visible light spectrum. So it's kind of not doing the best job towards the infrared end and the ultraviolet end. And unfortunately, our tanks are closer to that ultraviolet end where the sensor is just simply not optimized. So you're going to get a lot of color weirdness depending on the camera. A better camera sensor, sure, you're going to get better performance. But the vast majority of people that are selling in this hobby, they're not exactly professional photographers. That's not what they got into this for. So you might get just some quirkiness, and it's all just in the camera itself. Number 4, kind of the more hot topic that people take a lot of criticism for online anyways. It's that post-processing, which means you're not just taking a file straight from a camera and just publishing it. It's you're doing some sort of manipulation to make that photo different in some way. It's the part of photography, especially with regard to corals, that can be abused the most. Now, I would argue that photography, half of photography, is post-processing. Like if you were to talk to your wedding photographer and say, I just want all of my stuff straight out of the camera, they're going to be like, well, sure, because that's going to reduce the time that I have to spend on this by 3/4 probably. It's going to look worse, but if that's what you want, hey, I'll bill you. There's no such thing as an unprocessed photo. When your camera shoots anything, what it's seeing is an analog signal that it then turns into zeros and ones. You can't see the zeros and ones. Something has to turn those zeros and ones into, let's say, a JPEG that you can actually see. So something is doing the processing. Either the camera is doing the processing and you're saying, great, I trust the camera's ability to do it. Like your cell phone, you're shooting your selfie or something like that on Instagram, it's no big deal. But when you're talking about, again, challenging subjects to shoot, you really can't rely on the camera to do that for you, because guaranteed, it's going to screw it up. You're not taking a picture of your cat or your dog or yourself. You're taking a picture of something really weird that camera really wasn't optimized for. So you will almost always get a better picture if you shot it in RAW and you did some post-processing with it. The problem though is people can just eliminate all realism from the photo. I mean, and we're not even talking about like doing straight up color swaps, because that's entirely possible in post-processing. You want that red coral to be blue, you can turn it blue. But what I'm talking about is just like changing saturation, for example, changing sharpness to something that's kind of unrealistic, things of that sort. And there's varying degrees of this. It's not a, if you post-process your images in any way, shape, or form, you are a fraud. That would be a really unfortunate stance to take. You shouldn't purchase anything online in that point. There's like a sliding scale as far as that stuff goes, right? There's like clear abuse, and then there are really bland photos that probably came out of just straight out of the camera. Who's right, who's wrong? It's a lot up to the consumer, but I guess my point in all this is it's difficult for somebody that's just getting into this to realize when something is heavily post-processed to a point where you shouldn't really realistically expect that particular coral to look like that. There's a couple places that I buy from that I know what extent that they will take post-processing. So on some things that just look amazing, I mean, I kind of know it's like, that's not what that looks like. I shouldn't expect it to look like that. And I accept that gray area risk. It's like, it's not gonna be what that photo looks like, but I'll still purchase it because I have an idea of what it'll eventually be anyway, and it's close enough. But I've been doing this for like over 30 years. I mean, for somebody that's just new to all this, it could be very bewildering, and it's like you might just get a lot of shock when something is clearly not what that picture would ever look like. So that can be a point of frustration. So there are a couple tips that I can think of that might help somebody that's new in all this to purchase corals online. The first thing I would look at is look for big solid blotches of color. So you might look at like an overblown like blue highlight, for example. And if it's just a solid patch of one color, that's kind of showing that that section is just simply oversaturated. So somebody might have gone a little bit too extra when they were just dialing up the color in that picture. Another thing you can look at is if you just do a Google image search. So copy paste the name of that coral, put it into a Google image search, and just compare it with photos that other people had taken of that same coral. Somebody might call a particular zoanthid one thing, and another person might call it another, but Google Images for the most part does a pretty good job of giving you like a broad sample, regardless of what you punch in there, unless it's a truly unique name that nobody calls it anything but this. But you can see other people's photography for that same coral. And hopefully, like based on not just the photo that you're seeing on one site, but the photo that you're seeing on many sites, you can get like a clearer idea of what you can expect in your own tank. Last point, number 5. I had just mentioned that I had been doing this for a long time, and I have a general idea of what to expect when it comes to post-processing of corals. And I was just thinking, like, how would it feel to be new at this, to kind of like get into that mindset, to not really know what you're looking at? And I just realized that I'm actually a novice when it comes to one relatively new trend when it comes to shooting coral, and that is yellow filters. A yellow filter is essentially like a yellow gel that like knocks down a lot of blue light, or an amber filter sometimes it's called. It's used a lot in diving because when you dive like down more than 10 feet, you only see 2 colors. It's blue, it's black, that's it. But if you're using like an amber filter, you're actually able to then bring out a lot more of like more neutral, warmer colors like the yellows, reds, oranges. For the first 20-something years that I've been in this hobby and seeing other people's photography, yellow filters weren't a thing. I think the proliferation that you're seeing of yellow filtered images has come about because of how prolific blue LEDs are now, and also our camera's inability to shoot very well under blue LEDs. If you just take, let's say, a cell phone, right? One of these guys, cell phone. You shoot an all blue tank, it's gonna look gross. Lots of that blue blotchiness, your camera sensor just does not know what the heck to do with that image. Again, challenging subject matter, poorly optimized camera sensor, you're gonna get a bad result. But if you just slap this little yellow filter on your lens, you turn what is an unusable garbage blue image into a halfway decent orange image. Now, I don't like the look of either. Either the blotchy, awful blue or like the over-the-top orange, but it is a lot better. But sometimes I look at these tanks and what I notice are some corals that just look absolutely incredible to me. It's because it's new to me, because I'm not used to seeing stuff under orange filters. All right, that pretty much does it for my 5 issues with purchasing online. If you have any questions about anything that we talked about that I didn't cover, maybe I missed some point, by all means, feel free to leave a comment, and either myself or somebody might know the answer for you. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, happy reefing.